I'll start with a brief introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm the Vice President of PSAC Local 901. I'm Vice President Community Relations. My name is Doug Yearwood. I'm going into my 4th year of the PhD, and it's really wonderful to be joined by over 100 people. It's a really unique opportunity. Typically, I only get the chance to interact with you in a very limited fashion for about 5 minutes. Inside department meetings, and because of COVID and everything that's going on, it's a really great opportunity for us to be able to have over 100 people join us, and potentially even more as more people filter in. So I'm just going to circle back to what Sam said at the beginning. I think it's best if people want to use the chat function to ask any questions. Recognize that there might be some limitations on that if you're using a mobile device. So what I'm going to do at the end of the presentation that I give is I'll do my best to answer all of the questions that are in the chat. And then for those who are unable to use the chat function for whatever reason, if you like, you can use the microphone and I'll do my best to answer your question. You just need to be comfortable enough to speak and you know, that's on you. So it's imperfect, but hopefully that's okay with everyone, and assuming that it is, I'm going to carry on. So Sandra, if you want to turn to the next page, we're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that Queens is situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. Of course, we're grateful to be able to live, learn, and play on these lands. It's important that we reflect on the myriad ways that colonialism shaped and continues to shape the development of space and the structures we occupy, from our housing to the buildings we learn and teach in. To acknowledge this traditional territory is to recognize its longer history, one that predates the establishment of the earliest European colonies. This territory is for the Indigenous people who lived and continue to live on it, people whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants today. I'm joining you from Ottawa, which is unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The sovereignty of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples was recognized in the Royal Proclamation of 1763. Their right to this land was never surrendered. Instead, it was stolen by colonial capitalist forces, namely the Canadian bourgeois state, its legislative and judiciary branches, and its repressive apparatus in the military, the RCMP, police departments, and prison systems. As many of you are aware, Indigenous land theft continues to this day to be unchecked, and with increasing violence and intensity, we demand the right of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe, as well as all Indigenous peoples in Canada and across the world, to the self-determination of their nations and national sovereignty. And I think it's important that we reflect that, given everything that I've said and I'm sure what you know. With that in mind, Sandra, if you're willing to turn to the next page, I would like to begin by discussing who we are. So this is PSAC Local 901. Of course, we're your union of graduate teaching assistants, teaching fellows, research assistants, and postdoctoral scholars at Queen's University. I don't have an exact number of who's a postdoc here, who's an RA, who falls into Unit 1, who falls into Unit 2. So I'm going to provide a fairly general overview, but we are a directly chartered local of PSAC Canada, or PSA Canada. Our nonprofit organizations strive to protect, maintain, and advance the interests of the members of the local. We're committed to promoting equity and social justice within the local, PSAC, Queen's University, and the broader Kingston community. If you can turn to the next page, Sandra, that would be appreciated. So I'll start today with a bit of a variations update. I recognize that many of you, this might be your first interaction with the union. This stuff might not pertain to you specifically, but I think it's important as you move through your academic career to recognize some of the things that we are doing in the day-to-day to fight for our members. Just recently, we were the first academic local in Ontario and perhaps in Canada, at least as far as I'm aware, to win a variations to win variations in our contract for both Unit 1 and 2. So what this means is that for people who are going to be TFs and postdocs who've had to convert courses to online learning for the fall and winter terms, an extra $1,000 is going to be transferred to you at the end of the term in recognition of the extra work that this has done. And this was done as a result of our executive sitting down with the employer, explaining how strenuous it is for academic workers at this time, and really getting them to understand that, you know, we can't be expected to do additional work without additional pay. We've also been able to win an additional $250 for TFs and postdocs who converted in the winter 2020, so just this past semester. There's also going to be an array of teaching resources and campus support that's available for members who cannot complete duties off campus. And we also ensured that intellectual property rights for remote teaching are protected as per the CA. On top of that, for all you TAs out there, this is a completely unprecedented time, and we really want to encourage all of our members of PSAC Local 901 to apply for reimbursements of expenses that are incurred by working remotely during COVID. There's a resource that you can find via the Queen's University Human Resource page, and I'm going to post that link in the chat right now for you to view. For those who are watching a recording, I'll be sure to have that available for you as well. But I've just posted it. You can take a look on your own time. So these are things that could range from improving your internet service to a whole host of other things. Being completely honest, it is rather ambiguous. So what we're trying to do to ensure that you actually are being protected and defended is that if there is any issues, if there is something that you're having trouble receiving payback for, that you've had to take on that you consider to be an additional expense, we ask that you get in touch with your department steward. If you don't know who that is, that's okay. You can reach out to the PSAC Local 901 executive, and you know, you can even reach out to me. There's a number of ways you can do that. You can send me an email to my student email, which is 16dy3@queensu.ca. You can also send an email to my work email, which is preferred, which is vpc.psac901@gmail.com. And I'll be sure to send that to the appropriate person. We do have 2 co-chief stewards who I encourage you to reach out to first and foremost. But if you don't know, I just want you to know that you can reach out to me, and I'll do my best to help you out. So I think that's it for that page, Sandra. If you can move forward to the next. There's just a brief update for you. It's been a very tumultuous past 6 months or so. We were supposed to have elections in an AGM back, I think it was in March or April. Of course, everything got put on hold as a result of COVID-19. And as such, we are slated to have elections and an annual general meeting at some point. We hope towards the end of the month. We don't have a specific date. There's testing going on today to try and figure out just how smoothly we can make an election happen and ensure that, you know, the integrity of the vote is maintained and everything like that. We're trying to ensure that this is a smooth transition and that it's as democratic as possible. So I want you to be aware that there are going to be elections. It's going to be a full slate of elections, meaning everyone from the president to the co-chief stewards to my position to, the equity officer, health and safety. I mean, every single executive position is up for election. And we also have our annual general meeting where we'll be passing the budget and everything like that. I will ask for people who have just joined that you turn your microphone off, if that's at all possible. We are recording this session, and I think it would be best that if you do have a question, as I said at the beginning, we reserve that for later. So there's also a number of important committees that you can get involved with. As you see on the screen, there's the bylaw committee, there's budget, union structure, social justice, political action, stewards council, health and safety, postdoctoral scholars committee, and grievance committee. Whatever you're interested in, we can try and find something for you. Our union is only as strong as our members make it. So your involvement does make us a lot stronger. And I encourage you to think about what sorts of things you're interested in. If it's about social justice, if it's about helping the broader Kingston community, the Political Action Committee and Social Justice Committee might be spaces for you. If you're concerned, obviously this is a very strange time with COVID. If you're concerned about health and safety, please get involved in the Health and Safety Committee. It's really better if we have people who are representative of the entire campus and not just a few select departments. So the more people who are involved in more departments, the better off we're going to be, the more we're going to be able to defend and enhance the rights of our members and ensure that everyone's protected, safe, happy, healthy, that sort of thing. So these are just things that I would like you to keep in mind. With that said, Sandra, I think we can turn to the next page. So this might be, and probably is, given the time, it might be your first experience becoming a unionized worker. Of course, work is increasingly precarious. There's less and less people who are unionized. So you might not even really know what the purpose of a union is, or if you do, it might be a little abstract. But essentially, I'll boil it down and try and keep this short. A union is created in a workplace when a majority of workers in a particular place sign membership cards to join a union. There's a great resource available that I can try and make available to you. Doug Nesbitt, who was the former executive member with PSAC 901, did a great podcast on CFRC, our local radio station, detailing the history of the union movement within PSAC 901. There was a failed attempt that didn't quite make it, and a subsequent attempt that did under the PSAC banner. It's a fascinating history, and I encourage everyone to learn more about it. That aside, here in Ontario, the action of signing a membership card leads to a government-supervised secret ballot vote to determine whether or not the majority of the people in that workplace want the union to represent them or not. Thankfully, we've moved past that, and we are now an officially recognized and chartered local. This is despite typically some employer opposition, and unions really do exist because the majority of workers believe very strongly that the introduction of a union at their workplace will help better their lives through improving working conditions, seeing a rise in wages, and also increased benefits. In terms of PSCC, Local 901, we're the legal bargaining agent for graduate teaching assistants, teaching fellows, research assistants, and postdocs. There's approximately 1,800 TAs and TFs in Unit 1, close to 200 postdocs in Unit 2. So we are a large local. We have 2,000 members. Each unit has its own collective agreement that's negotiated separately. Only in the last year, I guess it's coming on 2 years now, that research assistants have joined our union, and the process to achieve their first contract, I believe, is slated to be ratified soon, if it hasn't already. So, of course, as I said, we are your union. Your priorities really shape what we do. But at the base of it all, we bargain for higher wages, paid training, paid overtime, increased benefits, and we have a collective agreement with the university that guarantees these working rights. You might be interested to know, I know I certainly was, that PSCC Local 901 members with Unit 1 contracts, so this is TAs, TFs, and postdocs, have 9 hours of paid sick leave. So this means if you're a TA and you have a 130-hour contract, you can take 9 hours away if you're sick. And if you're sick, you just let your supervisor know. You don't need to make up those hours additional to the contract. You also get overtime pay, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit more. But if you anticipate working more than 8 hours on any given day, except for some field trip, if that should be something that you're doing in whatever department, you need to talk to your supervisor and arrange to get time and a half for the additional hours worked over the 8 hours. Moreover, it used to be that you'd end up working for a longer period than the contract specified. You'd hear something like, oh, by the way, it's December, you're still working for us. They have to give you notice for that now. But we also bargain for other rights. We do our best to fill gaps that improve the quality of life for our members via things like childcare bursaries, which I encourage you to check out. And also, seeing as unions have played a historically progressive role in society, we also carry out research in the interest of our members. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to view our Facebook page, but there was recently research carried out by one of our members in denaming the law building. It's a fantastic report put out by a friend of mine, Samuel. It's really worth checking out. The research is fascinating. He dug up and went into the Queen's University archives to look into the naming of the building, and I think provides a fairly strong and critical analysis that I encourage our members to check out. Sandra, you can move to the next page if you could, please. So as I mentioned, there's a couple concerns this year, and I'm just going to touch on these briefly. For one, health and safety, more than ever. I think, for those who are working from home, your concerns might be lessened, but for people who are working outside of the Faculty of Arts and Science, who may have to work within labs with students. I don't know how many of you there would be that are having to do this, but your safety is paramount. We don't want a single member of ours contracting COVID-19. That would be an absolutely horrific thing to happen. Of course, it's not just you. I assume, the majority of us are young. We might be okay, but we do have families. We have members that have families. We have people who are in contact with the elderly. So it is super important that we have a safe and healthy campus. And in order to do so, we want you to keep in touch with your department stewards and your executive. There's been a long, ongoing sort of conversation with the university. All the unions this past summer have met. We're trying to be a unified voice. We want to ensure that the janitors feel like they're able to do their job. We want to ensure that, the faculty feel safe wherever they might be, and really show a unified front, and ensure that our campus is a healthy place to be, and that we're following proper protocol, that we're going above and beyond to ensure that no one's going to contract this horrible virus. So that being said, I really want you, as I said, to keep with your department stewards. If you don't know them, you can get in touch with your exec. You can send me an email, as I said. It's vpc.psac901@gmail.com if you have any concerns. Our health and safety officer, unfortunately, has had to leave their position. They've gone off and they're starting a PhD, I think, at UBC, so they're unable to continue. And because we haven't had elections, there's a bit of a transition thing. So we're working collectively on this as an exec. We are in contact with the employer. We're slated to have more discussions about health and safety moving forward, and we'll be sure to keep everyone updated on that front. Secondly, another big concern of ours this year is that our members are keeping track of hours. Let's be honest. I mean, switching online is a challenge for many people. It's a lot more intensive. It used to be, and maybe some of you are unfamiliar if you're a first year TA, but for the past 3 years, I can speak from my perspective. You have an office hour once a week or twice a week. Students come, students go. The conversations are about 10 minutes. It's rather fluid, but now everything's going to be done over email or over Zoom or some medium like this. Of course, I'm sure most of you have heard about the burnout online that can occur. I think typing emails is exhausting. It takes a lot longer. It takes a lot more energy, a lot more consideration. So in light of that, we want to make sure that you're keeping track of your hours. This can be a bit of a contentious problem. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on academic workers and students to sort of appease their departments, to not swim against the current, to do what you're told. Of course, your supervisor has some power over your life and whether you succeed or not. So you don't want to cause too many ripples. I'm very aware that this is a concern that most people have faced, and they might want to keep their head down and just do what is asked of them by their supervisor or by the employer, by the department head, whoever. But we want to make sure that you're getting paid for your work. And I'm going to touch on this again in a little bit, but we do have an hour tracker. I think, Sandra, it might be on the next page. It is. So if you can flip to that, there's a downloadable Excel spreadsheet that you can use. Really anything that you're doing, as long as you're tracking your hours, that's what we're concerned about. You know, if your contract's for 130 hours, it might be the case that you're spending 65 hours this year sending emails. I mean, that gives me a headache just thinking about it, but it is an unfortunate reality. So you want to make sure that when you're discussing your contract, when you're meeting in your departments, if you haven't done so already, that you're cognizant of how much time is being allotted for interaction with students, for you know, the little things that are hard to keep track of. But just stay on top of things. If there's any concerns, again, you need to reach out to your department steward, or you can reach out to the executive. There's a number of ways that we can go with this, everywhere, anything from an informal grievance to an official grievance. So I just want members to be aware of that and of their rights as workers. I should say before I move on, and this will come up, I guess, one more time, but in terms of health and safety, you do have the right as a worker to refuse unsafe work. I'm going to leave it there and pick it up in a couple of minutes, but it is worth stating that if for whatever reason you feel unsafe, you do have the right to refuse unsafe work. And I think it's important that you know that. So, Sandra, with that said, I think that we can turn to the next slide, which is reviewing important parts of the collective agreement. So there's essentially 4 key things that I want to go over here, and I am cognizant of the time. I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to try and speed through this a little bit. The first is a grievance, and a grievance is defined as any work-related dispute that arises out of the interpretation, application, administration, or alleged violation of the specific 13 terms of this collective agreement. You'd have to refer to that. I don't have the time to go over that right now. But it is, of course, a mutual desire of both the union and the employer that grievances be addressed as quickly as possible to ensure a healthy and happy work atmosphere. There's 4 types of grievances. There's the individual grievance, the group grievance, the policy grievance, and the employer grievance. An individual grievance is when an individual employee grieves against the employer. A group grievance is when 2 or more employees grieve against the employer for the same or similar reasons based on the same or similar events, transactions, or decisions. A policy grievance is when the union as a whole grieves against the employer's interpretation, application, administration, or alleged violation of the collective agreement. And an employer grievance is when the employer grieves against the action of the union. So if you turn to the next page, just briefly, Sandra, there's a brief outline of how this works. So there's 2 slides here, but we can just quickly go over this. So the informal approach is the one that I think is most common. So before a grievance is filed formally, the matter is brought to the attention of the supervisor. As you see, matters brought to attention of the employment supervisor within 15 days of the date of the occurrence. Everyone meets to discuss it, to see whether or not this can be resolved. And hopefully there's no further action needed, and whatever concerns that you have are addressed. If not, we move into the grievance procedure. So if this is unable to be resolved, a formal grievance is submitted to the department head or the designate. This grievance is submitted within 10 days of the informal discussion. The department head meets with the employee to discuss the grievance within 10 days of that. And following that, the department head will respond in writing to the employee. And from there, Sandra, if you want to flip to the next page, depending on whether or not the employee is satisfied, if yes, the grievance is closed. If no, you submit a grievance to the Dean of the Faculty. This must be submitted in writing to the Dean within 10 days. This goes on, you can see for yourself here. But the point is that there's a fairly structured process here that people follow. We like to think that we're able to resolve most grievances in a professional manner. And I think it's important that you know that there is a process involved. So if you're feeling abused or harassed or whatever, there are steps that we can take to try and improve your working conditions. And we like to think that we do a pretty good job of that. So again, if there are any concerns, if there's anything you need to grieve formally or informally, you got to come to us, you got to come to your department steward, and we can move forward there. We are here to represent you. So it's something to keep in mind anyway. So if you can go back to the previous slide, there we go, to hours of work. It's the second item I would like to discuss. It's sort of related to keeping track of hours. But this is an article in our collective agreement that applies to everyone, although there's differences between TAs, TFs, RAs, and postdocs. So for TAs and RAs, the maximum hours of work per week, regardless of the number of TA ships or RA ships that the employee holds, is no more than an average of 10 hours per week. So typically we receive 130-hour contracts. We work for 13 weeks. It's supposed to be 10 hours a week. TF contracts are a little bit different. There's 200 hours. Postdocs, they work something like 37 and a half hours a week. Of course, there's some flexibility there, but at a baseline, there's no postdocs who should be working more than 50 hours a week. And this is laid out in the collective agreement. You're paid per hour, so it's essential that you track your time, especially given that we're in these unprecedented times. There's always going to be some awkwardness involved here. We don't want to cause any problems typically. But if we view this from a collective standpoint and not just an individual one, we can see that, you know, if someone's willing to bend and be flexible and be taken advantage of, it only serves to cheapen our value as workers in the long run. And we need to stand strong collectively as a union. That's what we're here to do as unionized workers. You know, I'll sort of point out tongue in cheek that I saw somewhere Queens ran something like $100 million surplus last year. I think they can afford, you know, a couple hundred extra bucks to pay for the hours that are worked. It's also important to know that TA and RA hours cannot be carried forward from one appointment to another. And as some of you might remember from last semester, I don't know who's here again, but because of COVID, and this predated COVID, but it was a perfect example of it. TA activities as per the teaching assistant form and within the allotted hours may on occasion extend 1 month beyond what would otherwise be the appointment end date. Of course, this is still in line with your hours worked and everything like that. And such a requirement must be communicated to the TA by no later than the end date of the appointment. Because of, I mean, last semester was a perfect example where things were thrown into total chaos. And I think some people likely had to work a little bit longer than, say, the end of April. Maybe some went into early May or something like that to fulfill the contract. And that is allowed per the CA. It just needs to be communicated to you by no later than the end date of the appointment. All of your assigned duties for hours of work will and should be found in your respective TAF or RAF. So for TFs, it's also worth pointing out that courses you teach are going to receive marking, teaching assistantships, and secretarial support as is available for similar courses in the applicable department. I don't know how many TFs are here, but if you're a first-time TF like I'm going to be in the winter, it is good to know that there is support available for you. You don't need to feel completely isolated or alienated or anything like that. Your department should be able to support you in some way, shape, or form. So the third thing that I would like to chat about is harassment and discrimination. We have policies defending our members, but they work only insofar as we report them, right? So the employer agrees to provide a working environment that's free from discrimination, harassment, and violence. Of course, this isn't always the case in practice. I know plenty of TAs in a number of different departments have been mistreated by students for a number of different reasons. Of course, it's always disappointing when you hear this, but you know, given everything that's happening in the world right now, you know, there's a lot of international students. I think about my friends from Lebanon. There's a lot going on in the world, and we don't always know how to respond when you hear about some of these, you know, the mistreatment that people face for their beliefs, for anything, right? So it's incumbent on us as union workers to have each other's backs. That's basically the point I'm trying to get across. If you see something, you should check in on your friend, on your colleague, and ask what they would like to do. Maybe they don't want to do anything, but maybe they do, and maybe they just need a little support. We really want to create a positive working environment. So we're striving to make our workplace free from all sorts of harassment, from discrimination, from sexual violence, from everything. Speaking of sexual harassment, there's a number of ways that this is intended to be relayed, and according to the CA, workplace sexual harassment means engaging in a course of rude comments or conduct against a worker in the workplace because of sex, sexual orientation, their identity, where the course of comment or conduct is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome, or B, making a sexual solicitation or advance where the person making the solicitation or advance is in a position to confer, grant, or deny a benefit or advancement to the worker, and the person knows or ought reasonably to know that the solicitation or advance is unwelcome. That's how it's defined in the CA. So, you know, I think I just want to bring to your attention that you are defended by a collective agreement. We will work as a local to defend your interests. We take this very seriously. So if anything like this should occur, you need to reach out to, you don't need to do anything. You need to do what you think is best. But I want you to know that we're here to support you, and we're going to do everything we can to do that. And there are policies that help defend you. As imperfect as they may be, there are policies there that exist that work to defend your place, your rights, and everything like that. So I think it is important that we recognize that, and that you know that there's an outlet for you to go to if you're facing things like discrimination or harassment. So the fourth thing, the fourth and final thing I'd like to bring up is health and safety. So this is going to go back to what I said earlier, but the employer is subject to the provisions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act of the Province of Ontario and its regulations, including the provision that calls for a worker representative selected by the union on the university's joint health and safety committees. It is agreed that the university and the union will cooperate to the fullest extent in the prevention of accidents and the promotion of safety and health at university workplaces. To this end, the parties acknowledge and agree that all university employees on university and third-party premises where employees work are required to comply with worksite-specific policies, procedures, regulations, and standards relating to health and safety. The employer recognizes the right of workers to be informed about hazards in the workplace, to be provided with appropriate training, and the right to refuse unsafe work in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, where there is an immediate danger to the employee's health and safety or to the health and safety of others. So that last sentence spells it out perfectly. If you have any concerns about COVID, you do have the right to refuse unsafe work. We encourage you to tell us more if you are concerned, so that we can help work through this process. Just know that we have your back 100%, and that this is essential this year. If you're outside the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, if for whatever reason you're working on campus, If your offices don't have cleaning supplies, whatever, you need to come talk to us. We're going to try and get that dealt with. We're going to try and make you feel as safe and healthy as possible on campus. You do have the right to. I don't know if there's another slide to that. No, it doesn't look like it. So you can turn to the final slide. How can I stay informed? You can find us on Facebook, PSAC 901, on Twitter. We post a little bit less there. You have my email address now. I can punch it in again, vpc.psac901@gmail.com. If you want to copy and paste that, you can get a hold of me. But I really recommend that you visit our website. It's fairly easy to navigate. You can go to www.psac901.org and feel free to tour our website. We have a whole bunch of orientation resources that are available for you. I'll post that in the chat now. And I recommend that you take a look at all of this. So that's basically all I have to say. I appreciate the 135 of you who sat through and listened to me drone on for the last 30 minutes or so. If there's any questions that you have, please, again, punch it into the chat box. If there are none, I'm already seeing that there is one. So we'll work our way through these, and then if anyone else has a question that they can't punch into the chat box, I'll see if there's anything anyone wants to say via audio, and we'll wrap up. So the first question is from Simon. Hi, you mentioned there was sick hours. Is there similar provisions for those like me with kids in elementary grades, given that schools might abruptly shut down for a couple of days due to COVID? Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a bit of a gray area. In my experience, and it might just be mine, who knows, but typically your department's going to be fairly amenable to you taking the time you need to take care of your family. I haven't heard any horror stories from the last 6 months. It seems like most people, most professors and department heads were fairly reasonable about this sort of thing. Though, there's no documentation. I will say this, there's no documentation required. So if you say you're sick, you're sick, and you don't need to make up that time. I do recommend that, you advocate for yourself, that you explain your situation, and try and hope that there's some compassion within your department. There's been a number of times in the past 3-4 years, my experience at Queen's, where I've had to fly home for emergency things. I had an aunt pass away. I flew home, and my colleagues actually just stepped up and helped and did the grading that was needed. At the end of the day, didn't take any extra time. I've done the same thing for other people. So, step in to fill in. Generally, profs are pretty reasonable and flexible with that sort of thing. It is a bit of a case-by-case thing, but I will say, if there are any problems, please reach out to us, and we can try and help you navigate that as best we can. So I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to respond via the chat. Lauren asks, if we were offered a base salary for a year as part of a funding package, how does that work with the set hourly wage? If we have a contract with a number of hours times the hourly wage is more than offered in the funding package, do we get all the funds or only what was offered within the funding package? Yeah, so the way that the funding packages work, this is a little bit more on the student side of things, but I see where you're coming from. Yeah, so I mean, when they're budgeting and they're sending out your funding forms to you, they're calculating it on a 130-hour contract if you're a TA. So your set wage at $42.73 or whatever it is, less the 7% in lieu of benefits and vacation or whatever. So $39.93, I think it is, something like that. It is what they're calculating and is what they anticipate you to receive. If you do work more than that, they're not going to dock you from whatever scholarships. If you get the QGA or Ontario Graduate Scholarship or Vanier or SSHRC or whatever, they're not going to take money and claw it back from you after they've sent you the form. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, again, please let me know. It's a little difficult without having you there to respond. I hope that works. So another question says, hi, you said that TAing should be approximately 10 hours per week. My department has given me two 260-hour contracts, one in the fall, winter. I believe they're 13-week contracts. How does this align with the suggested hours we're supposed to work? Even if I didn't use all the hours, it would break down to be over 10 hours a week. Yeah. So I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, you're working 2 contracts now. I'm not sure. If it's one per semester, then that seems normal. I have had times where I have worked a 65-hour contract in addition to a 130-hour contract. I mean, it's ultimately going to be on you to grieve or try and figure out a situation. Hopefully you're in a position where your funding package is, adequate enough. I mean, I recognize we're not exactly millionaires here. We're making a very little amount of money in the grand scheme of things. So it can be difficult, and there's no perfect answer to that. I mean, I think that if it's something you're uncomfortable with, it does violate the CA. If not, and you want to take that on, you want to make it happen, that's up to you. But the point is that you can't be forced to do that. If you want to make extra money, I suppose that's sort of your prerogative.
So Doug, yeah. I see that Nina says one contract is for the fall and one for the winter.
Oh, okay. So that would be 130 hours per term, right? So that's falling within the bounds of the CA. Does that make sense? So you're working 260-hour contracts in total. Okay, well, Nina, how about you reach out to me after this, and we can go over this in a little bit more detail, and don't need to sort of air our laundry out or whatever. Yeah, I hope that I can deal with you one-on-one. I think we'll be able to figure out what's going on a little bit better there. Are there any other questions? I think I heard someone pop on the mic. I don't see any more in the chat, but I am happy to answer any other questions that you might have. So I don't, at risk of this turning into total anarchy, if someone wants to brave it and ask a question, go ahead, and I'll do my best to respond. Okay, hearing none, I do see a final question here. Just to clarify, 10 hours per week is the maximum we're allowed to work as TAs. I mean, you have to read the CA closely. I think like what I said is that it should be no more than an average of 10 hours per week. So if you hold a 130-hour contract, you should expect to work 10 hours a week for those 13 weeks. So you may have to work, the way it's always worked for me is that it's a little lighter in September and a lot heavier in December. I expect around exam time to work about 20 hours a week, but maybe it's 5 hours a week or whatever through the first few weeks of September. So long as it balances out, that's what we're typically concerned most about. And of course, I mentioned if you have to work an 8-hour day, or more than an 8-hour day, you need to be paid time and a half for that. But that needs to be sort of mandated by the prof who you're working for. So yeah, I mean, there's been times where I've had like 12-hour work days, but that was just because I was panicked and had to work and put that all on myself. So it's a matter of sort of being mandated to work more than that. And for that time, you need to be compensated more. Another question is, hi Doug, you mentioned an additional $250 for TFs who converted to online in the winter term. Can you expand on that? Do we need to apply for it? Yeah, so I mean, this is like very new to me as well. I can quickly take a look here to see if I can answer that question for you as to how you go about that. My understanding is that this would be paid in a lump sum at the end of the term, although I recognize you're trying to claw back from the last semester. So what I would do is I would reach out to the department first and let them know about this variations update that has been won and collectively agreed upon by the employer and the union. They should be able to just help you right through there. So just reach out and say, I converted online, there's a new variations update, send the link, which I can do here, just to make it easy for you. They'll read that, and hopefully there's no problems. If there is, just reach out to us. We'll make sure that you get paid. We'll do everything we can to make sure that you're paid. So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question. I did provide the link. If there's anything else, just let me know. So if there's no more questions, I'm perfectly happy to wrap up here. I've given my email a few times, but it doesn't hurt to give it once more, I suppose, for the people who are still online. You can just send me an email at any time, vpc.psac901@gmail.com. I encourage you to visit our website where you can get in touch with the appropriate person to handle whatever concern or interest you may have, which is psac901.org. We really hope that you get involved in the union. This is going to be an interesting year, interesting first semester anyway, with everything being online. It's a little tough to get to know everyone, but know that you do have an exec, albeit an outgoing exec, that is working hard for you. We hope that you participate in the elections process, that you get involved, and that you know, you really help build the union into a fighting militant force that is able to continually advance our interests, to get better wages, that sort of thing. I mean, I mentioned earlier that we are a very precarious group. Obviously, the situation as graduate students is anywhere from deplorable to unacceptable, especially as master's students. I mean, I remember the little funding I received, how hard it was that year. There's a lot that we need to continue to fight for, and it is only going to get better by you getting more involved with the union. So I hope you think about that. I hope if you have some additional time, you can show up to meetings and whatever you can do. Just know that we're fighting for you and that we're stronger if you get involved. Yeah, so that I'll get off my soapbox now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate you being here. There was a question in the chat about are the seminars provided this week considered as our work? In terms from what I know, some departments are offering to pay for training. What is the PSAC version of that question, of that question? Yeah, answer to the question.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on whether or not this is mandatory or not, right? So you showing up here today wasn't mandated, but you showing up in your department meetings, where I might see you later, is something that's mandated. You do receive paid training for that, and it should be counted in your hours on your contract. when you do sit down in your departmental meetings with whatever prof it is that you're teaching for, just ensure that they put that in the hours on the contract, and that you're unified as a group and say, hey, like, we had to do this training, it was mandated, and we're getting paid for it. So if it's 1 or 2 hours or whatever the case may be, you had to be there. It was something that the department said, so you're getting paid for it. I see Kelly's question. Over the summer, I had a contract where the total hours were predicated on the completion of student assignments rather than the estimated time to complete the total contract. They estimated 5 hours of marking per student for 25 students, but then reduced the total hours, assuming a 90% completion rate. Yeah, I mean, Kelly, this is such an unprecedented time, right? It was a learning experience for everyone. I don't think that this is exactly common. Yeah, I don't, to answer your question directly, it's not common. It's unfortunate that that is what happened. Did they reduce? Yeah, I mean, maybe you and I can chat afterwards, because I'd be interested to know, like, they can't take away your worked hours. I mean, you can tell them that you worked 130 hours and you have to get paid for that. You know, they're agreeing to this funding. They can't claw it away. You received that letter that I'm assuming most people have received by now about your funding package for the year. So if they clawed that back, reach out to me, and we can learn together and move forward together to try and resolve that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Doug. I want to, on behalf of the Center for Teaching and Learning and all of those participants today, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to stop recording now, and then you can stick around if you want to answer a few more questions in case there are some. But thanks everyone for coming. We're very grateful.